Marco was a quiet boy who lived in a small town by the sea. He was 12 years old, with short dark hair and warm brown eyes. He loved walking along the beach after school, feeling the sand under his feet and listening to the gentle sound of the waves. He liked to pick up shells, white, pink, and sometimes even light purple ones, and imagine that each shell had its own secret story. Marco was happy spending time alone, but sometimes he wished he had the courage to talk more with other children at school. He was shy and afraid that if he tried to speak in front of people, he would feel embarrassed. One day, Marco's teacher, Ms. Hall, made an announcement in class. "Next month," she said with a big smile, "our school is having a talent show. All students can join. You can sing, dance, do magic tricks, or even show your artwork on stage." The class became very excited. Some students whispered about what they might do. A few girls in the back said they would sing a song together. Two boys in front wanted to show their juggling skills. Everyone seemed full of ideas and energy. Everyone except Marco. He sat quietly, feeling his heart sink. A talent show meant standing on a stage, looking at all those eyes watching him. He thought, "There is no way I can do that." At home that afternoon, Marco tried to forget about the talent show, but the idea stayed in his mind. He sat on the wooden steps outside his house, holding a small pink shell he picked up earlier. He wondered if he had any talent he could share. He did not dance, he did not sing, and he had never tried performing magic. He liked painting pictures of the sea, but the idea of showing his art in front of everyone made him nervous. Just then, his grandmother came outside. She lived with Marco and his parents, and she was always kind and patient. She sat beside him and asked, "Marco, is something wrong?" Marco sighed and told her about the talent show. "I have no talent," he said sadly. "I'm too shy to do anything on stage." His grandmother smiled gently and said, "Everyone has something special, Marco. Maybe you have not discovered it yet." She thought for a moment and then said, "I remember when I was a child, I was also shy. But I learned that when you try something new, you might find a hidden skill inside you. What if you try something you have never done before?" Marco looked at his grandmother. "Like what?" he asked. She tapped her chin and said, "I notice you love the ocean and its sounds. What if you learn to play an instrument that can make calm, beautiful sounds, something that reminds you of the sea?" Marco considered this idea. He had seen a small wooden flute in a local shop near the harbor. The flute was simple, but it made a soft, gentle sound, like a breeze over the water. He had never played any instrument before, but maybe he could learn. The next day, after school, Marco went to the shop by the harbor. It was a cozy place, full of handmade items like baskets, scarves, and small musical instruments. He found the wooden flute hanging on a wall. The shopkeeper was an older man with a friendly face and kind eyes. Marco pointed to the flute and asked, "Does this sound nice?" The man smiled. He took the flute from the wall and played a few notes. They were soft and gentle, reminding Marco of waves. Marco felt something light up inside him. He bought the flute with the pocket money he had saved. At home, Marco showed the flute to his grandmother. She smiled and said, "Beautiful choice. Now you must practice." Marco held the flute and tried to play a note. The first sound was not very good. It was too strong and loud. He tried again, blowing more gently. This time, the note sounded clearer. He remembered how the shopkeeper blew softly, like he was whispering through the flute. He practiced every afternoon after doing his homework. Sometimes he went down to the beach, found a quiet spot, and tried to match the sound of the flute to the gentle rhythm of the waves. At first, it was difficult. His fingers did not know where to go. He often made mistakes and played the wrong notes, but he kept trying. After a week, he noticed that he could produce a simple melody. It was not a real song yet, just a few notes that sounded calm and smooth. His grandmother listened and nodded with encouragement. You see, she said, you are learning, slowly but surely. Marco felt proud, and though he was still nervous about performing on stage, he began to think it might be possible. As the talent show came closer, Ms. Hall reminded the students to sign up. Marco wrote his name on the list and wrote flute next to it. He felt his hand shake a bit when he turned in the paper. When other students saw his name, some looked surprised. They had never heard Marco speak much in class, let alone play music, but nobody teased him. Instead, one boy said, "Wow, I didn't know you could play the flute." Marco just smiled quietly, unsure what else to say. In the evenings, Marco practiced more. He listened to simple tunes on the radio and tried to copy them. He also made up his own melody, thinking about the sea at sunset, the way the sky changed color, and the way the waves touched the shore softly. His grandmother often sat near him, closing her eyes and listening. She said, "Your music is improving, Marco. I can feel the peace in it." On the day of the talent show, Marco felt very nervous. He wore a clean white shirt and simple black trousers. He waited backstage with the other performers. The two boys who were going to juggle practiced with small balls. The group of girls who planned to sing quietly hummed their tune, and another boy tuned his guitar. Marco held his flute close to his chest, wondering if he would remember what he practiced. He took a deep breath and thought about the ocean. Quiet, steady, patient. When it was his turn to go on stage, Marco's heart beat fast. The lights were bright, and he saw many faces in the audience, teachers, classmates, and parents. He searched for his grandmother's face and saw her smiling in the second row. That made him feel better. He closed his eyes for a second and pictured the beach. Then he lifted the flute to his lips and began to play. At first, he played the simple melody he learned from listening to the waves. It sounded like a whisper, soft and careful. The audience became very quiet. Then Marco added a few extra notes, imagining the colors of the sky and the feeling of wet sand under his feet. His melody grew a little louder, warmer, and more confident. When he finished, there was silence for a moment, and then applause filled the room. Marco opened his eyes and saw people smiling, clapping, and even nodding with appreciation. He felt light and happy, as if he had grown wings. He bowed his head slightly and walked off the stage, his cheeks warm but his heart full of joy. After the show, Nadia, one of his classmates, approached him and said, "Marco, that was beautiful. I never knew you could play like that." Marco smiled and said softly, "I just learned recently." Another boy, Leo, said, "Your music made me feel calm, like I was sitting by the ocean." Marco felt his face turn red, but this time it was not from shyness, it was from happiness. He thanked them and realized that he had done something he never thought he could do. He had shared a part of himself with others, and they liked it. When Marco and his parents returned home, his grandmother was waiting at the door. She opened her arms and gave him a hug. "I knew you could do it," she said. "You see, talent can be hidden inside, waiting for you to be brave enough to try something new." Marco nodded. He understood now that fear often hides our abilities, and that by daring to try, we can discover something special within ourselves. That night, Marco went to bed feeling proud. The next day at school, he expected people to forget about the show. But several classmates said hello to him in the hallway and asked if he would ever play again. Marco realized that he was no longer just the quiet boy who walked along the beach alone. He was now also the boy who could play a gentle, beautiful melody on the flute. He thought about how many other new things he might learn if he just tried. Maybe next time he would paint a picture for the school art fair or join a small music group. He did not feel as afraid anymore. The sound of the flute had become the sound of his own courage. Just as the waves never stopped moving, Marco now knew he could keep growing, learning, and finding his voice in the world, one soft note at a time.